Hello and welcome to the first actual show on my YouTube channel. My name is Sven and this is my channel. I don't actually have a name for the channel yet, but the name of this show is going to be The Disposable Show. And the reason it's going to be called that is because this is the show where I talk about sort of video game industry news and the games that I've been playing recently. So, the way I figure it, these episodes are going to be pretty disposable because in a couple weeks the video game industry will have moved on from what it's talking about right now, and I will have moved on to playing another game, or in this case, other games. So that's the basic idea of this show. It's gonna be interesting. I don't know how people are gonna react to a news show that's basically me talking over a game while I'm trying to play it. Poorly in this case, because it's kind of a game I haven't been playing for very long. It's Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, which is based on Far Cry 3, which was a game that came out last year, which is a shooter where you're sort of trapped on an island with lots of crazy people who are trying to kill you, and you have to sneak around and kill them and shoot them and all kinds of stuff. And this game is a little different. It's based on sort of the technology in that game, and it plays a lot like that game, but it's a big but. It's a lot shorter, it's a lot cheaper, and it's essentially a satire of sort of crappy 80s action movies, and it's hilarious. There's a lot of funny stuff in the game. It really pokes fun at those sort of terrible movies we all used to watch in the 80s, and it's a lot of fun to play because of that. So I'm having a lot of fun with it, playing through it. That's Far Cry 3. Watch me play it poorly. The other games I've been playing, I started playing this game EVE Online. It's been around for like 10 years, so it's kind of an old game, but it's a massively multiplayer online game. So it's sort of like WoW, except there's spaceships in it. And WoW is World of Warcraft for those of you who don't know what that is. See, I've already been discovered. I was trying to sneak into this place, and now they've all seen me, and I have to change strategies. But anyway, EVE Online is a game that lets you fly and build giant spaceships and fight them and shoot at people in space. So that's kind of why I'm into that game, just because I'm into all that space stuff. It's fun. It's not so much fun as it indulges obsessive compulsive behavior. I'm not sure how good it is for me to be playing that, but I've been enjoying myself so far. We'll see how that ends up in a few weeks. So yeah, EVE Online, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, and then the third game I've been playing is a game called Prison Architect, which is this sort of indie game it's still in alpha, so there's still a lot of bugs and stuff in it. It's not technically finished, I guess, but it's on Steam, and it's an independent game where you are building a prison, because it's Prison Architect. And the reason I sort of got interested in that game is because I was a criminology major in college, so I sort of am interested in anything that is related to sort of criminal justice. And the thing about that game is, I think it, like I said, there's still some bugs in it, so it's not necessarily the best game, but it raises some interesting questions, because as you start to play through the game, you realize that it's more expensive to treat prisoners well in your prison. So if you sort of treat prisoners badly, you make more money. But then you're treating people who are in a prison badly, which is typically not considered a good thing. Sorry, I got distracted by the game again. I do that all the time. But yeah, you're treating these people badly, and technically you're winning by doing that. So for me, it raised some. Well, it didn't raise those questions because I was a criminology major, so I sort of am predisposed to ask those questions. But I think for somebody who maybe wasn't a criminology major, which I think is most people, it would raise some interesting questions about, you know, the penal system, the prison system, and how we treat people who we're incarcerating, and just, you know, general questions, which I think is good that games can do that now. They're sort of allowed to raise questions that they sort of weren't allowed to before. I mean, back when I first started playing, people were not interested in the idea of games being an art form at all, really. They were just sort of dismissed, and they kind of are still dismissed as this thing for kids, but I think it's cool that now games can be used as an actual art medium. Just tore that guy's heart out. I'm talking about high art. But I do think it's interesting that games now can be used to raise sort of social political questions, as I do that again, because I'm kind of weird sometimes. So yeah, I've been playing Prison Architect, which is still in alpha, and I've been having fun with it. So I really hope that the guys that are making it, who I don't remember the name of that company right now, I'm sorry guys. I really hope that they get to finish their game and it ends up coming out. So that's what I've been playing, and then on to the second topic of the show, which is video game news, video game industry news. And the big news right now is a couple weeks ago, Microsoft finally held an event where they announced their next console, which is going to be called the Xbox One, which is an interesting name for the third console in the series of consoles, the Xbox One. And what they did was they had a big announcement up in Washington where they invited, you know, all kinds of press. There was, of course, there was gaming industry press there, but there was also a lot of, you know, sort of Wall Street and, you know, mainstream press people there, but they didn't really talk about video games or video gaming all that much at this press conference, so it's kind of hard to, like, sort of know what their plans are for games on the system. What they mostly talked about was TV and sports, and they actually did. There is some interesting stuff that they're doing with the new console. They're going to be making it a pass-through HDMI device, which means that what you can do is run your cable you know, HDMI through your Xbox, and it will sort of overlay all of the Xbox voice command systems over your cable, so that you can do, because the new Xbox One will come bundled with a Kinect. Well, the new version of Kinect, which is the 2.0. Kinect 2.0, and the whole idea is that because cable is so, well, the interfaces on cable boxes are so sort of awful, that if you overlay it with the voice commands and sort of gesture commands that you can do with a Kinect 2.0, that if they do that, they'll, you know, be able to sell the new Xbox to not just video game players, but also people who sort of are not happy with their cable. which is a good idea, I guess. I mean, it's sort of interesting that that's how they wanted to announce their new system, by talking about its sort of TV functionality. I get it though, because a lot of times if you if you go and watch the press conferences at E3, which is the biggest, which is coming up next week, I think, and it's the biggest sort of video game industry conference, and it's usually held in LA, I think. And if you watch the sort of press conferences that they have at that event, a lot of times they're half about all the new stuff that the system is going to do with games and half about all the other weird stuff that they've decided to include in the system. And so by splitting it up and doing half of the sort of entertainment portion of the conference at this event that was 2 weeks ago, and then doing the actual games portion at E3, it kind of makes sense because that's talking to two different audiences. But the thing that I was struck by was that nobody that I know that's not into video games even knew this announcement was happening. So I don't know how they thought they could get away with not talking about games hardly at all. I mean, they talked about some games. They talked about Madden, I think, and they talked about other EA Sports games, and they talked about Call of Duty. The thing is, though, all those series are not... They're super popular, but they're not popular with people who tend to play the rest of the games that are on a system. If you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who just play Madden, and there's a lot of people who sort of just play Call of Duty, but then they don't play any of the other games that are out for the system, or they don't play very many games that are out for the system. So it's kind of weird. It was just weird. I mean, while I was watching it, I had this sort of feeling that, oh, this is a company that doesn't care what I think of them, and they kind of should care what I think of them, because I'm probably the guy who's gonna be most likely to want to buy their thing right away when it's at its highest price and they're going to lose the least amount of money on it. Because that's the thing about consoles, is the companies that make them, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, they tend to lose money on the first iteration of the system because the technology is far enough advanced that it's still expensive at that point. Now, the Xbox 360, let's say, that people are buying today is not the same. It doesn't cost as much to make as the original Xbox 360, so now they could almost turn a profit on selling those. But when it first came out, they lost money. And the same is true of the PS3. They would lose money on everything that they sold. So you're really sort of depending on, and that's still at the highest price that it's out at. So you're sort of depending on people early adopting so that you lose the least amount of money, so that you can keep making the system and then start building it more cheaply, and then you can start, making money eventually on games. Not sure how much sense that all made. I'll have to go back and listen to it and maybe cut it out. But the point is that the people that they should be selling to are the people that buy the most games, and they sort of didn't bother even trying to sell to those people at this conference. And it was just sort of a weird thing, which is always true. Whenever a company tries to talk to their actual customers, it usually gets weird, because companies are just not good at communicating. As far as I'm concerned, they just don't know. They don't know who they're talking to most of the time, and they don't know what that person wants, or they don't really understand what they want from that person necessarily. So it's just weird. And that's one sort of big piece of news. And another sort of piece of news that, well, I don't know, it's not as big as the Xbox thing, but it's interesting to me, because what it is let's see. Well, this see, I've drawn a blank on what I was going to talk about. Oh, now I remember. Nina Sarkeesian, who does a web channel called The Feminist Frequency, who has sort of become famous for her Kickstarter campaign to sort of expand that channel, because it sort of started off originally as being a channel that examined sort of women's issues in popular medium, particularly film. She started a Kickstarter campaign to expand into talking about video games, and that got the video game community kind of up in arms, because for some, I don't understand why anybody would be up in arms about a discussion, but it was just, she got the worst sort of internet bullying on Kickstarter about this campaign, where all she wanted to she just wanted to discuss women's issues in games. Sort of, which I was all for, and I don't understand why anybody would get mad about it. But people did, and because I guess that's what people do, they get mad about stuff. But because of just how sort of terrible people were to her on Kickstarter, she ended up making double of what her original goal was. And because of all that sort of weirdness that went on Kickstarter, now that the videos have started to finally come out, there's been a lot of scrutiny placed on them. And there's a lot of criticism sort of being leveled on all these videos that she's been putting out. Well, she's put out 2 so far, so not all these videos. And I just don't understand what people are up in arms about. So I'm probably going to link to her video in the comments, or just in the description for this video, so maybe people who watch this can look at it and come back and tell me why they have objections to it. But really all she talks about is just in general how sort of, well, the first 2 videos are about a specific trope, which is the damsel in distress trope, which is not unique to video games. Obviously, it's been around for as long as storytelling, pretty much. She talks about that trope and how it applies to video games, and people are just really mad about it, and I don't understand why. Because it's not she's not mean to games. She just sort of states her opinion generally about how these tropes are applied in games, and I just don't understand all the outrage. I typically don't understand outrage about a lot of stuff, but in this case it just seems weird to me that people are getting up in arms about somebody talking about games, because I always think that that's a good thing. And if you watch the video, it'll make you sort of think more just about how this type of storytelling is applied in games, or how certain tropes are applied in games. And I think that that's always a good thing. It's always a good thing to question. It's always a good thing to think about stuff. That's kind of why I do this, is because I like to talk and I like to think about stuff, particularly video games. So it's just weird to me that other people would be mad about a video whose stated purpose is to spark discussion and increase awareness of stuff. But maybe that's just me, so maybe other people will take a look at it and convince me that I should be mad about the feminist frequency videos, but I'm just not. So this was Disposable episodes. You may just go ahead and make fun of me in the comments if you want for the name. I'm not sure it's gonna stick.